All right, good morning or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this lunchtime session, Learning and Teaching in the Bologna Process, the State of Play. So this is a panel discussion, and it takes place also in the framework of the LOTUS project, the Leadership and Organization in Teaching and Learning at European Universities project, which you might have heard about. I'm delighted to welcome you all, and I'll just quickly go through a few technicalities and a short presentation of the project and of the context of this talk, and then I'll pass the floor to my fellow speakers. Yes, so just a few tips, although you might already be familiar with that right now, as you already experienced the whole morning on this platform. So please, your microphone and camera switched off, but you can ask the floor. So on the left bar of your screen, you have a little man doing this, and this is for requesting broadcast, which basically means I would like to take the floor. And when given the floor, you can switch on your camera and your microphone. And then we would be grateful if you could switch off again your camera and your microphone after your intervention. We cannot feature too many cameras at the same time, and this is also why we are proceeding like this. Thank you very much. Don't hesitate to use the chat box to greet, to comment, to ask questions. I see that this has already started, so don't hesitate to bombard the chat box. We won't be using nor monitoring the Q&A box, so let's just keep everything in the chat box, please. And finally, a last thing is that after the panel discussion, we will also do some interactive discussion with you, and there will be a live poll. So there is a right panel on your screen where you have a tab called pool, but anyway, the pool will pop up also on your screen, and you can see the results in that tab. All right, so that was it for the technical information. And if you have any issue, just put a comment also in the chat box. So I'll quickly go through the presentation of the LOTUS project. This is a project that is that has been on for already a year. It takes 2 years in total, founded by Erasmus. And we do that in partnership with several project partners. You see them all on the screen. And the project has two strands. On the one hand, organizing a leadership development program for individual institutions on learning and teaching. And on the other hand, leading a policy dialogue strand, which is about to offer you this session, but also offers a series of events to discuss how to enhance learning and teaching with a broad range of stakeholders in the matter. And the aims of the project is indeed to foster institutional capacity for enhancing learning and teaching, but also exploring at the same time how this can be best supported by national and European policies. And one of the final outcomes will be to provide a set of recommendations for supporting learning and teaching development through interinstitutional cooperation and at all levels. So this was a very short insight on the LOTUS project. Of course, you're welcome to ask questions if you want to know more. I'll put a link to the webpage of the project in the chat box in a minute. And then what we are doing now in this session is that we are bringing the Bologna process closer to you in case you are not directly participating to it or not yet. So this session is basically to host our two of our co-chairs in the Bologna Follow-up Group working group on learning and teaching, which is the official working group working precisely on learning and teaching. So Anna and Terry. The purpose of this group is to support the members of the European higher education area to develop successful ways to improve strategies for the enhancement of learning and teaching. We have quite a few countries participating to that working group. And among the tasks we explore several important areas of activity for learning and teaching, for example, student-centered learning, staff development, and also innovative learning and teaching, for instance, but the co-chairs will say more about that later. And one of the tasks is also to develop and translate into concrete actions that could be done and support member countries in developing national actions and strategies. So that was it in a snapshot, let's say, but it will be further developed in the discussion in our panel. So I'll hand the floor to you, Michael, and already you can close the presentation. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Therese, and good afternoon, everybody. Anna and Terry have already been introduced to you. I will briefly explain that they're both co-chairing this working group of the Bologna Process on learning and teaching. And they have very complementary backgrounds. Anna has been in the Croatian Ministry for a long time until recently, and has also been in this function in the BFUG. And Terry joined the BFUG recently. I think you have been subscribed by the Irish Ministry to get an informed voice and into the process when it comes to learning and teaching. So the Bologna Process, all of you know that, of course, but you probably, when you think about it, you associate it more with quality assurance, with recognition, and maybe with the transformation of the degree system to a bachelor master's, but hardly with learning and teaching. So we want to use this session here to explain a bit more in detail what is actually happening there in the Bologna Process at the moment on learning and teaching, also to disperse any fears that this is just to develop the next generation of European curricula. That's not what is happening. And we have a short exchange here with the two chairs, and afterwards you're also welcome to ask questions, and I give you the instructions for that later on. So if I could just start, Anna, what are you actually doing there in this working group? I mean, what are the areas that you're addressing, and how does that work?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Michael, for launching the discussion and asking this question. So, as you said, the topic of teaching and learning has not been very much present in the Bologna structures and in the work of the BFUG, Bologna Follow-up Group. So it was only with the Paris communiqué when teaching and learning became one of the hallmarks of the Bologna process, and especially with the Rome communiqué and the adoption of the recommendations to national authorities for enhancing higher education, learning and teaching, this became an important topic, more important than it has been before. I can say maybe the reason for that is because the BFUG gathers representatives from the ministries, and teaching and learning has been always understood as something under the competence of institutions more than of the ministries. But nevertheless, it has been acknowledged that also the ministries can have an important role, that the national policies can do something about this. So the establishment of the group was inspired by this idea that also some exchange of good practice and information about national policies and national initiatives can be shared among the members. So in the working group that is composed by representatives from different countries, we started to launch our discussions on the three main topics that come out from the recommendations. And these are how to make student-centered learning a reality, how to support teachers and staff development to foster enhancing teaching, and how to encourage innovative learning and teaching. And we were tasked as a group to propose concrete actions and concrete measurements and indicators how to measure the efficiency of what the ministries are doing. So this is where we focus at the beginning. At the beginning, we want to see how these recommendations can be transferred into concrete actions and how they can be comparable between the countries. How can EHEA members learn from each other and support each other in the implementation and in somehow benchmarking, but only with the scope and the purpose to enhance the implementation. So we structured ourselves in three subgroups according to these three areas. And this is where we start with how to measure implementation. And Terry will complement now with other activities that we do.
I feel like I'm a real newbie to the BUFG, and it takes a while to get your head around it. So believe me, and I've been part of it now for the last few months. But one of the things I suppose that is near and dear to my heart about the process is one of the things we have to do is to support each other to build capacity and understanding about the enhancement of teaching and learning. And I don't know if you've seen the wonderful LOTUS report that was produced yesterday, but was published yesterday. But if you look at it, right, you'll see that across all of the different countries, there are huge numbers of initiatives that are happening in terms of enhancement of teaching and learning and approaches at a national level. So trying to get agreement in terms of measures, and this is going to be a tricky business. And part of me is wondering whether we even should be doing it, but not to worry. But what I do like about the whole process is that opportunity to share what's happening, to learn from each other. And a key part of the way that we're going to do our work is to organization of peer learning activities, which will not only be open to the member countries that are actively working with us in the working group, but to the other countries as well. And I think that's going to be very useful. I think that the conversations, we're lucky because COVID has put a flashlight and has shined a light on teaching and learning like never before. So I think this particular working group in this particular period should, if we do it right together, be able to make real good strides to ensure that teaching and learning is valued across all of the countries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So there are twofold purpose. The one is to activate the ministries, but also to ensure that there is a European exchange, that there's a European dimension on this matter on learning and teaching. Now, but how does that work? I mean, you just said it, Anna, the responsibility for learning and teaching, and that has been set on many occasions, is actually with the institutions. So what is the role of the ministries then in this? How do they, what can they do in this process, and how can Bologna assist?
Yes, to say and to respond it simply, they can support institutions, but they can support institutions in numerous ways. So, for example, starting with national strategies, to what extent teaching and learning is encompassed by the national strategies? Obviously, there are strategies on higher education and on different aspects, but are there national strategies on enhancing teaching and learning? I wouldn't say that would be often the case. And when something is important and supported by the national strategy, then it is supported also by funding that is allocated to achievement of such strategic objectives set by the governments and by the parliaments. So, and funding also, it's not enough just to assure sufficient funding, to allocate funding to institutions. But there are numerous supporting measures that can be done by the ministries. Like, for example, the ministries can bring institutions together in a way, in kind of national structures where the institutions among themselves can exchange good practices. As we want to do that at the level of the BFUG, of the HEA, at the European level, it can also be done at the national level. So there are some good practices by some institutions that could be shared. And it is not easy for the institutions to gather themselves together, to group themselves, if they are not incentivized by the national governments and national policies. And also the issue that was open this morning about sharing resources, educational resources, that's something that can also be strongly supported by the ministries, because teachers and institutions tend to keep their material, teaching and learning material, among themselves. But if they are somehow supported, stimulated, and incentivized to share, to make it open to others, then it can be done. But without incentives, it's hard to expect some activity only by the institutions themselves.
Mm-hmm. So incentive support, very clearly. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. We heard this morning in the opening session, one of the presenters referred to the teacher as the lonely cowboy, basically having to find her way through it. So it's clear you need the institutional support, but then what you say is also you need a national framework. And Terry, something that I skipped in the introduction, you have been until recently the director of the Irish National Forum. So you should have a lot of experience in this. Standing between the sector and the ministry, basically.
Yeah, do you know what? I actually think the key thing is alignment, right? And sometimes some of the problems that we have is that the ministry and the sector aren't aligned, and there's money there, but it's not actually what the sector really feels they need to do, but because there's money there, they're responding to it. So I think the key thing here is that the ministry and the institutions have got to work together for alignment. And a good example of that, and I know that the EA have showcased some of the work in it, is the Next Steps project that's just recently been completed in Ireland, where all of the stakeholders in the sector got together and agreed. The project was called Next Steps for Teaching and Learning Moving Forward Together. But what a powerful voice that is, saying we've all agreed this is the way we should go. And if the ministry and the funding can now support that, then it means that you have that alignment and you can do what needs to be done. And the other thing is that I think that having some national strategy or obvious, one of the things we found when we looked in Ireland was, yes, teaching and learning is in policies, but it's in other policies. There's a research policy. There was a big consultation for research in Ireland, big consultation for access in Ireland. There wasn't a big consultation for teaching and learning. There should be, because then I think that the funding will follow it, and once the funding follows it, and the time is given to institutions to enable the changes to happen. Funding over a year is no good. You need multi-annual funding so to enable institutions to plan and to make sustainable change. That's the end of my rant.
Okay. When you say alignment, I can see for some people the alarm bells will go on, because they know alignment, that the ministry says this is what we are going to do and you have to align with that.
No. Partnership then. Change the word. It's just that at least we're all decided to head in the same direction. And remember, the expertise for teaching and learning doesn't rest in the ministries. The expertise rests in the sector. And we have to help the ministries, show them how things need to be developed and move forward in an informed way.
So that's the role of this working group, not to design the curricula, but to get the ministries educated and savvy about how to collaborate with the sector. I think I take it till here as an introduction, and I'm turning towards the participants now. Do you have any questions? And if you have so, there is an enabling button that you can press, and then we will enable you to switch on your camera and your microphone. I think this is how I understood it should work. So if I can just see.
Yes, Michael, just to confirm, I'm checking the list. So you can, it's called Request Broadcast. You can press the button to ask for the floor, and I will open your microphone and your camera, but I see nobody.
Nobody has a question yet?
Nobody has any question. Okay, you have a comment in the chat box, but I see no question.
To follow funding, but there's a comment, yes. Agreement with Terry, we are often forced to follow the funding, but when this is not aligned with our key priorities, the priorities are not reached, indeed, yeah.
Okay. Michael, I think nobody has asked for the floor, so you can continue for the moment.
Yeah, good. Then I do that. Maybe we get to the other topics that you are taking up. So on your menu are somewhere also micro-credentials, which is a hot topic in Europe. Any thoughts how this will be approached? Given also that we just had a big report from the BFUG, the Microballs report on the micro-credentials, which looks more into QA and recognition of the whether the Bologna tools are actually applicable to micro-credentials.
I'll come in quickly here, just and I'll hand
Please,
over to you
yeah.
then. Right, so in terms of our credentials, we're going to wait and learn. We're going to do a lot of learning from the huge amount of work that's currently going on. And I think, to be fair, to remain true to the focus of our group, is our focus will be on what does learning, what implications do micro-credentials have for the learning and teaching process? And that's the question that we'll be asking, because it's the quality assurance processes, the structures, there's all those other things. But I think what we'll have to focus on is what implications, if any, will micro-credentials have on the learning and teaching process, and what considerations do we need to think about? And I don't know if you want to come in.
Sure, thanks. I think micro-credentials are an important topic that needs to be addressed by all the groups, so also teaching and learning as well. So, it touches upon all the three topics that we mentioned before. So it is about student-centered learning, because students should be able to guide themselves through their learning path, and to module their way that is most appropriate to them. And this modular structure of curriculum gives the possibility to do that. It's not just a long standalone course, 3 years, 5 years, 2 years, but smaller units of learning that can make it possible for people coming from various backgrounds, people that are employed, or people that cannot afford themselves just to be students. So all these kind of non-traditional learners can be now encompassed. And of course, it is challenging for teachers how to adapt to this variety of learners. And that is then the second topic that we cover in our group, which is how to support teachers in order to deal with those challenges. And then finally, innovative teaching and learning, it encompasses micro-credentials as well. And what I want to emphasize here is that micro-credentials now is maybe a new name, a topic that we all speak about. But everybody always emphasized that there have been activities that can be interpreted as micro-credentials even before. It's just now a new name, but this new name can bring something new as well, which is, for example, in my point of view, at least the overall recognition of what is awarded, because we can, and this recognition can be given to micro-credentials only if these instruments are included in institutional quality assurance arrangements, if they are part of external quality assurance, if they are aligned with all the other activities of the institutions. So only if they are assured, if all the principles, all the tools are implemented, then they can be publicly recognized, or even recognized cross-border. Because now when you go and try to find your place in the labor market with something that is not a degree, not a traditional degree, you would you could face some challenges. Maybe not in the private sector, in the business world, but at least with public employers, there is a need to work on the recognition of such smaller units of learning and award that students can get with that. So I think it is an important topic that we all need to deal with. And from the perspective of teaching and learning, there's a huge work to be done.
Okay, thank you. I think so. That's good to know that there is a complementary work coming from this group to the topic of micro-credentials. You have all seen the reports that came already out, more on the recognition on the QA part. I'm coming now to the first poll that we have. Can we have the first poll launched? So we would like you to answer the question, which of the following needs to be developed in order to enhance learning and teaching in your country? And you can click all options that apply. So it's really about what should be done at the national level in your country. So let's see. First answers coming in. I think you should all be able to see the poll then. On the right-hand side, there is one of the windows which says poll and where you can see the results. Wait a few seconds. Okay, we're probably there. So consideration for, no, now it jumped. Training, incentives, and support for teachers comes out on the top, followed by digital strategy and infrastructure, collaboration between higher education institutions, more funding, of course, I would say. We haven't talked about digital so far. What role does digital play in the discussions that you have in the working group?
I think it is included in innovative teaching and learning and innovative pedagogies that are covered with the third subgroup and the third line of themes. And I'm sure that it will be encompassed, but Terry is chairing this group, so I'm sure that she has.
Yeah. Well, I'll be a bit controversial now, and remember, I used to have a very good camera called the preceded camera. It was great. It was just super, and I had an old roll of film in it, and I used to use it all the time. And then I got a digital camera, right? And I kept talking about my digital camera. We don't talk about digital cameras anymore. We just talk about cameras, right? We can't talk about teaching and learning anymore by saying it's digital, it's this. It's pedagogy first. Digital is one of the contexts within which we're working and everything. So I think we need to see how we can support the pedagogy and best with all the tools we have and how we can develop those tools and everything. But I don't think we should hang on digital. All right.
So, yeah.
So, but I think that in saying that, and I just have one other thing, and just in saying that though, that we need for individuals, be it staff, students, that to be able to access in an equitable way the technology if it's being used. And that's about our infrastructure and what we're doing. But it's not about the software like the Let's Get Digital wonderful conference thing that you've got now. The infrastructure piece I see is making sure that we have everybody has access and we're inclusive. So okay.
So it will become more embedded, and it was probably a good thing that the Bologna Process didn't set up an extra group working on digital issues.
Yeah, but I still think we need to think forward. I mean, right now we're thinking digital is the way that we're delivering this conference online. But what about virtual realities, artificial intelligence? I mean, these things is the next era of it. It's going to constantly evolve. So it's just the context within which we're working, and we need to grow and develop within that context.
If we look at the results of the poll now, so we have the results now, I think it has got. So if we look at the top three ones, consideration for teaching and academic careers at the top, training, incentives, and support for teachers, and digital strategy and infrastructure development. And then at the very bottom, we actually have changes in national legislation and or QA. Does that come as a surprise to you? Any comments? Any thoughts?
No, it's about people.
No.
The people are important.
Yeah.
I think the consideration for teaching and academic careers goes back to the focus that's put within, and it goes back to the big old thing about the hierarchy of STEAM between research and teaching and learning, and that's where that. I think there is because of the changes with COVID, and because we're now using digital tools to support our pedagogies in different ways, there is needs for staff to be to build capacity in staff, but we would have said that prior to COVID anyway. So I think that that's important. And then digital strategy and infrastructure development, we have to be able to access. You can't use these tools unless you can access them in a ways that's meaningful. Like my storm yesterday, if that was permanent, I wouldn't be able to access anything. I wouldn't be able to be here today. Anna, what do you think?
We are happy that you are with us. So no strong storm in Ireland, apparently.
No. Now, I just find it interesting because it aligns very much with the surveys that we also have carried out, the trends, and then also in 2020, the one on digitally enhanced learning, where, the non-consideration of teaching in academic careers still turns out as a major obstacle for development. And on the other hand, we were surprised that not many actually mentioned national level regulatory obstacles, or not across Europe. When you look on individual countries, then yes, in some countries that plays more of a role. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm moving to the next question that we have for the audience now. And I'm reading it out. Is that also put up? I'm not sure. So the question is, what to you would be a qualitative indicator for learning and teaching? And I think that we have to situate a little bit, because one of the tasks that you have in your working group is also to develop indicators for learning and teaching, which will be included in the Bologna Process implementation report. I think most of you are aware of that. Every 2 to 3 years, there is another Bologna Process implementation report that basically shares data on how far the Bologna reforms have actually been implemented. And in the two recent ones, there's actually not much data on learning and teaching. And if there is, it comes from the EUA reports and from the ESU reports. But now for this round, it will be important to develop also some indicators for learning and teaching. Therefore, the question again to you, and you can, this time there is no poll, but you just write the answer into the chat. And you do that in a way that you write it, but you don't press the button yet. Just write it in. And I repeat the question. What to you would be a qualitative indicator for learning and teaching? So how should it best be measured? So if you give us 1 or 2 of your thoughts, and then you don't press the button, you wait. I give you a few seconds to put that in. And then the idea is that you would all press at the same time the button. So just a few seconds. We're looking for good indicators for assessing national level developments in learning and teaching across Europe. Okay, I hope that was enough. So then could you press the button?
Levels of student engagement.
Student engagement.
I think there's a strong Irish contingent there somewhere.
There is, indeed, yeah. Very vocal, yeah. Percentage of staff trained in teaching and learning. Probably we start this with these 2 ones, student engagement and staff training. Do you think that these can be turned into indicators for national level report, Anna?
Yes, I'm just thinking how to measure student engagement. What does it mean? Is it student engagement in teaching and learning process, in assessment, like we discussed during our breakout session? I think it is a challenging one, how to engage students in designing the assessment tools, or student engagement in the processes in the governance of the institutions, is it relevant for teaching and learning? Probably yes, in a way. I think it can be an interesting topic. It's not an indicator, but it is an area where we can look for more measurable indicators, because how will ministries report on student engagement levels? Very difficult, because I'm concerned with the practical dimension of measurable indicators. This is something that should be collected at a national level and then compared between different countries. So it has to be feasible. Student engagement is definitely a topic that could be an important one to be measured, but how to design an indicator that could be measurable?
Well, one of the things that's going on in Ireland at the moment is it was called the Irish Student Survey, Irish Student Survey of Engagement. And in all the institutions in Ireland every year run the Student Survey of Engagement that measures student engagement. And they have indicators across that. And they can, institutions get data for their own institutions. There's a national collation of the data, and it does give good insights. But having the data is one thing. Using the data to actually change what's not right is the other thing. And I think that a survey like this, where students have the opportunity to have their say, and for institutions to listen to what they have said, and to actually feed back to students what they're doing about what they've actually highlighted, I think is really important. I know that this survey, some of my colleagues here might be able to from Ireland might be able to say a little bit more about it. But I think that is something. You know, is there some sort of data collected from students on engagement? So,
well, we might have the difficulty that in some countries, like in Ireland, this is collected, but in many others it is not collected. But this would not be the first time that we start to build up data collection, and more and more countries will pay attention to this in their data collection in the future. Another one we had on teacher training or teaching enhancement, staff development. Is that something that ministries usually know about? Well, the report that we've just published, actually authored by Therese, has been mentioned. There we give some insights on how different systems deal with this. So I think in most systems we found it's actually driven by the sector, but usually the ministry should know something about it. Therese, if you could also post the link to the report that you have authored, that would be useful.
Yes, hi. Yes, the link is already posted in the chat box. It's somewhere
okay, further up. Yeah,
further up. I just would like to confirm that indeed it is highly dependent on the institutions themselves. But you have countries where there is a regulation that is mostly setting a threshold, and then it's up to each institution to provide, etc., in the way they would like to. So, for example, in some countries, you would have a minimum number of ECTS that teachers need to take throughout their career, for example, or in the first years of teaching, and something like this.
I would say that the ministries could report on that if it's part of national regulations. If there is a regulatory requirement for progression into academic career that is defined by, among other things, by professional development of teachers, then the ministries would be able to get that information quite easily, I would say. But if it's not the case, if it's entirely left under the competence of institutions, then it will be a little bit more difficult, but nevertheless not impossible. So also it depends on how did the DHEM members, the countries, how they set up the data collection at the national level when they report. report back to the BFUG and the implementation report. In some countries, there are structures, national structures with representatives from different stakeholders, institutions, and they can more easily then collect also data and report back. But in other countries where there are no such structures, I would say it would be very challenging, and they would not be able to give any information, any data on this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, I think that there are several others also linked to career development, so about professorships, and I guess there we also see probably more diversity across Europe than really clearly measurable standards at the moment. And the question is also whether this would change or whether this should actually change. I mean, how much diversity do we want to keep there?
The one thing, though, that by having, if we can identify these indicators, what we can do is to set a sort of a picture of particular ways that can be done. That these are things, these indicators should be things that are good to do for teaching and learning and teaching. And okay, if some countries can't engage with them just yet, it actually does say, well, how, and that comes back to sharing. We're saying, but how did you do that? And so they also act as kind of a planning for future activities. So I think if we can pick some, and it's going to be difficult, but if we can pick some that are high level enough that say, well, there's no doubt that this is actually really good for the enhancement of teaching and learning, and we agree that, right? How we get there and how we do it, then we can discuss. But and you don't have to hit all of the indicators on your first day or your second day, but get that sort of planned development, I think, is really important. And just one other thing, the important thing about having learning and teaching that Anna is always saying to me as part of the implementation report is that it's showing a value at that level for teaching and learning that we didn't have before. If it's not included, it's not valued. But now learning and teaching will be valued because it's now got indicators in this report. So I'm prepared to work on the indicators to make sure we get the value at the ministry level. How's that?
I think that's a perfect closing word for our discussion here. And what you said made a lot of sense, that this is actually not about setting standards, but about getting a kind of agreement of what are the issues that should be usefully aimed at in learning and teaching development, both at ministries and in institutional levels, and promote that and share also the ways on how to get there. And that's probably the task to which your group, but the Bologna process in general, this is how it works, given that the process as such has no legislative power. It's in the end the member states, the participating national administrations that have to decide on whether they put this in law or not. And it also has no funding. So when we talked before about incentives, there are not many other than agreeing on something and seeing that this is successful and hoping that nobody wants to stay behind. With this, I think I'm closing here. Thank you very much for being here with us today and for the discussion. We might call upon you once again. You will end your work in 2024. This is when we have the next ministerial conference, and there will be a report, and we will see some data on the state of learning and teaching in Europe. So that looks all very promising, and maybe in 24 we can have you here again, and you can share some of the results with us. So thanks to you, and thanks to the audience, and have a good afternoon at the forum. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.